The first time I saw the rulebook, it was tucked beneath a stack of dusty ledgers in the back office of Evergreen Mortuary. It wasn't a sleek, professional manual, but a battered, spiral-bound notebook, its cover faded to an indeterminate shade of gray, pages yellowed and brittle with age. My new boss, Mr. Abernathy, a man whose presence was as quiet and unassuming as the deceased he cared for, handed it to me with a solemn nod. "These are your nightly duties, Mark," he'd said, his voice a low rumble. "And these are the rules for staying alive." I remember the chill that ran down my spine, not from a draft, but from the unsettling gravity in his tone. I was just 22, desperate for work, and the overnight assistant position at Evergreen seemed like a godsend. Quiet, solitary, and a decent wage. I had no idea what I was truly signing up for. My first night began like any other. Mr. Abernathy gave me a quick tour of the embalming room, the viewing rooms, the small, sterile chapel. He showed me how to check the refrigeration units, how to log incoming and outgoing remains, how to set up for morning viewings. It all felt mundane, almost clinical. Then, just before he left, he pointed to the rulebook on my small, cluttered desk in the back office. "Read it, Mark. Memorize it. Don't deviate." His eyes, usually kind, held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or a deep, weary understanding. He left, the click of the lock echoing through the empty halls, and I was alone. That's when I opened the rulebook. The first few pages were exactly what I expected. A list of routine tasks. Clean the viewing rooms, restock the coffee station, check the security cameras, ensure all doors are locked. Then, the tone shifted. Rule 4, typed in a slightly different font. Under no circumstances are you to enter room 7 between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. If you hear anything from room 7, ignore it. It is not real. My brow furrowed. Room 7 was the smaller viewing room, rarely used, situated at the very end of the main hallway. I'd walked past it countless times during my tour, a perfectly ordinary room. What could possibly be in there that warranted such a specific, almost desperate warning? I continued reading, each rule more unsettling than the last. Rule 7, the sound of weeping from the chapel is not a grieving family member. It is a mimicry. Do not investigate. Do not acknowledge it. It will stop if ignored. Rule 12, if you see a reflection in the glass of the viewing rooms that is not present in the room itself, close your eyes immediately. Count to 10. When you open them, it will be gone. Do not look directly at it. The language was stark, devoid of explanation, each instruction a cold, blunt command. It wasn't a manual for a job, it was a survival guide. The most disturbing rule, however, was Rule 15. At precisely 3:33 a.m., you will hear a scratching at the main entrance. It will sound like fingernails on wood. Do not, under any circumstances, approach the door or look through the peephole. It is testing you. It wants to know if you are alone. If you respond, it will know. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a joke. The specific time, the precise description of the sound, it felt too real, too deliberate. I looked around the dimly lit office, the silence of the mortuary pressing in on me. The air suddenly felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. My first few weeks were a blur of nervous adherence to the rulebook. Every night, as 11 p.m. approached, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, knowing that room 7 was now off limits. I learned to move silently through the halls, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, my ears constantly straining for any sound that shouldn't be there. The mortuary itself was old, built in the early 1900s, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that seemed to absorb all light. It had a certain oppressive quiet to it, a silence that felt less like an absence of sound and more like a held breath. Then came the first test. It was a Tuesday night, around 1 a.m. I was in the back office, logging new inventory, when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching coming from the direction of room 7. It wasn't loud, not at first, but it was persistent, a soft, rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch against what sounded like wood. My blood ran cold. Rule 4 immediately flashed in my mind. If you hear anything from room 7, ignore it. It is not real. My instincts screamed at me to investigate, to make sure nothing was amiss, but Mr. Abernathy's solemn warning echoed louder. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles white, and forced myself to focus on the inventory sheet. The scratching continued for what felt like an eternity, growing slightly louder, more insistent, before finally fading into the oppressive silence. I didn't breathe again until it was completely gone. The weeping from the chapel began 2 nights later. It was a low, mournful sound, like a child lost in a vast, empty space. It started subtly, almost like a sigh, then swelled into a soft, heart-wrenching sob. Rule 7. The sound of weeping from the chapel is not a grieving family member. It is a mimicry. Do not investigate. Do not acknowledge it. It will stop if ignored. My stomach churned. It sounded so real, so genuinely distressed. Every fiber of my being wanted to go to the chapel, to offer comfort, to see if someone needed help. But I remembered the rule book, the absolute, unwavering tone of its warnings. I closed my eyes, covered my ears, and hummed a tuneless song to myself, trying to drown out the sorrowful cries. It took a long time, longer than the scratching, but eventually the weeping subsided, leaving only the deafening silence in its wake. I felt a profound sense of relief, mixed with a chilling dread. What kind of place was this? What kind of forces were at play within these walls? One particularly eerie evening, I was polishing the glass on a viewing room door, the polished surface reflecting the empty hallway behind me. As I wiped away a smudge, I saw it. A tall, gaunt figure standing directly behind me in the reflection, its face obscured by shadow, its eyes 2 pinpricks of light. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nothing. The hallway was empty, just as it had been a second ago. My blood ran cold, and the memory of Rule 12 slammed into me. If you see a reflection in the glass of the viewing rooms that is not present in the room itself, close your eyes immediately. Count to 10. When you open them, it will be gone. Do not look directly at it. I hadn't looked directly at it, not really, but I had seen it. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted slowly to 10, my hands trembling. When I opened them, the reflection was gone, the hallway still empty. A cold sweat beaded on my forehead. This place was actively trying to break me, to trick me into acknowledging whatever lurked in its shadows. I started to research the history of Evergreen Mortuary in my spare time during the day. Online archives, old newspaper clippings, local historical society records. What I found was piecemeal, fragmented, but it painted a picture of a long, troubled past. There were whispers of strange occurrences, unexplained deaths of former employees, a fire that had gutted a portion of the building decades ago, claiming several lives, though the official report cited faulty wiring. There were also vague mentions of the land itself, a former burial ground for an early colonial settlement, disturbed and built upon. The more I learned, the more the rule book made chilling sense. It wasn't just a guide. It was a testament to generations of people who had faced these same phenomena, distilling their terrifying experiences into a desperate set of instructions for survival. Please, if you're finding this story as unsettling as I am, consider leaving a like and subscribing to Nightfall Tales. Your support helps us uncover more of these hidden truths. The most anticipated and dreaded moment of my shift was always 3:33 a.m. Every night, without fail, the scratching would begin at the main entrance. It was always exactly 3:33 a.m., precise to the second. It started as a soft, tentative scrape, then grew in intensity, sounding exactly like long, sharp fingernails dragging across the heavy oak door. Rule 15. At precisely 3:33 a.m., you will hear a scratching at the main entrance. It will sound like fingernails on wood. Do not, under any circumstances, approach the door or look through the peephole. It is testing you. It wants to know if you are alone. If you respond, it will know. I would sit in the back office, frozen, listening to the horrifying symphony of scraping wood. It was a sound that burrowed deep into your bones, a primal fear that something utterly inhuman was just on the other side of that door, waiting. Sometimes it would pause, as if listening for a response, then resume with renewed vigor. The sheer precision of its timing, the consistency of the sound, it was terrifyingly deliberate. It wasn't a random noise, it was an intelligence, an entity actively trying to breach the barrier between its world and mine. I never approached the door. I never looked through the peephole. I just sat, heart pounding, until the scratching abruptly ceased, usually around 3:45 a.m., leaving me gasping for breath in the sudden, profound silence. After a few months, I started to notice subtle changes. The air in the mortuary grew colder in certain spots, even with the heating on full blast. Shadows seemed to deepen, to move just beyond the periphery of my vision. Sometimes I'd catch a faint, sweet smell, like old flowers and something else, something metallic and sickly. It was a gradual erosion of normalcy, a slow creep of the inexplicable into my everyday reality. I began to feel a constant sense of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. One particularly bad night, the rules seemed to break down, or perhaps the entity grew bolder. The scratching from room 7 wasn't just scratching anymore. It was a rhythmic thumping, like something heavy being dragged across the floor, or someone struggling against restraints. It was louder, more urgent, and it started earlier, around midnight. I huddled in the office, my hands clamped over my ears, trying to block out the horrific sounds. Then the weeping from the chapel began, not a soft sob, but a guttural wail, filled with an agony that felt too real to be ignored. It was a cacophony of terror, an assault on my senses, all the forbidden sounds happening at once. I was hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face, convinced this was the night it would break through. I wanted to scream, to run, to smash the windows and flee into the night. But Mr. Abernathy's words and the rulebook's stark warnings held me captive. Do not acknowledge it. It is not real. I clung to those words like a lifeline. As the chaos raged around me, I noticed something else. The small, ornate clock on the mantelpiece in the main viewing room, usually silent, began to tick loudly, out of sync with my own frantic heartbeat. It was a deep, resonant tick-tock, echoing through the halls, a counterpoint to the weeping and the thumping. And then at precisely 3:33 a.m., as if on cue, the scratching at the main entrance began, louder, more violent than ever before. As if whatever was outside was now enraged. The entire building seemed to vibrate with the combined horror. I felt a presence, cold and ancient, pressing in on me from all sides. I truly believed I wouldn't make it through that night. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The thumping from room 7 ceased. The wailing from the chapel faded. The scratching at the main entrance fell silent. The clock's loud ticking returned to its normal, almost inaudible rhythm. The air, heavy with dread moments before, seemed to lighten, though a residual chill lingered. I sat there, slumped in my chair, drenched in sweat, trembling uncontrollably. I had survived, but the experience left an indelible mark, a deep, psychological wound that would never fully heal. The next morning, Mr. Abernathy arrived, his face etched with a familiar weariness. He looked at me, really looked at me, and a flicker of understanding passed between us. "Rough night, Mark?" he asked, his voice soft. I could only nod, unable to speak, my throat tight with unshed tears and unspoken horrors. He didn't press, he simply put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of quiet, shared burden. He knew. He had always known. I continued to work at Evergreen Mortuary for another year, each night a tightrope walk between duty and dread. I never broke a rule, not once. I learned to live with the constant undercurrent of fear, the knowledge that I was sharing my workspace with something ancient and malevolent. The rulebook became my Bible, its warnings etched into my very soul. I never saw what was in room 7, never directly saw the reflection, never acknowledged the weeping, and never, ever opened the main door at 3:33 a.m. And because of that, I survived. I eventually left Evergreen Mortuary. It wasn't a dramatic exit, I simply couldn't do it anymore. The toll it took on my mental health was too great, but I carried the experience with me, a chilling testament to the unseen forces that can lurk in the most mundane of places. The rulebook, I heard, was passed on to the next overnight assistant, another desperate soul seeking work in a quiet, unassuming funeral home. I often wonder about them, if they read the rules, if they understood the true gravity of what they held in their hands. I wonder if they've heard the scratching from room 7, the weeping from the chapel, or seen the reflection in the glass. And I wonder, with a cold dread that never truly leaves me, if they've managed to survive the 3:33 a.m. test. Because at Evergreen Mortuary, the rules aren't just for the job, they're for staying alive, and some secrets once uncovered never truly let you go.